Hey everyone, and welcome to Ramblin' Reviews, where we analyze different types of media and/or their cultural relevance. My name's Christian, and this is The Amazing Spider-Man issue number 8. Before we take a look at that, though, we're going to first look at Strange Tales issue number 115, as Spider-Man does have a brief, and I do mean very brief, appearance in this comic. In this issue, there is a story called The Sandman Strikes, featuring the Human Torch and Spider-Man, written by Stan Lee and illustrated by Dick Ayers. Now, Dick Ayers is not a super prominent person in regards to Spider-Man or Marvel that I'm that familiar with. I looked him up, and apparently he's most known for the most work he did, it looks like, was on a military comic, we'll say, kind of like G.I. Joe, called Sergeant Fury, as well as something called Two Gun Kid, and then Strange Tales and Tales to Astonish, which were like his main things. He seemed to be pretty prominent in like the Silver Age and Bronze Age, as it were, the 50s and 60s. However, he's not really, he's not like a Todd McFarlane or Michael Straczynski or anything like that. So J. Scott Campbell, no one like that. That's I don't want to say he's not worth talking about, but he's not really relevant to the conversation as far as things like this are considered. But in any case, so the way that this story goes here is effectively, Sandman, I don't want to say breaks out of jail because it doesn't actually break. He just uses his sand powers to escape. Torch takes him on, fights him, and what he ends up doing is he like dresses up in a Spider-Man costume to make Sandman think that Torch is Spidey. He takes him out real quick, and he's able to flame on, get out of the Spidey costume, take down Sandman, and but the point is, Spidey has very little involvement in it. He's literally only in two panels. One is him swinging to the scene of the crime, and the other is him seeing Human Torch flying away after Sandman's been captured and everything, where Spidey even thinks to himself, basically, this town isn't big enough for me and Torch with all our villains and everything. So, I just wanted to touch on that because I am making an effort to really go through all of the media that these characters are, associated with. So when we're doing Spider-Man here, as this series and this playlist is concerned, that does include those little things where he's only in it for like a couple seconds or something. I don't know if parody things like, a little clip in Family Guy or Robot Chicken and stuff will be included. If you're interested in that kind of thing, let me know, and I'll try to include those things too. But at least as far as this kind of stuff goes, I want to make sure that that's, properly accounted for, as it were. But in any case, we now move on to the actual Amazing Spider-Man issue number 8. This features a story entitled The Terrible Threat of the Living Brain, written by Stan Lee and illustrated by the one we all know and love by this point, Steve Ditko. The story begins with Peter and the gang at their science class when their teacher rolls in this giant robot. And pay attention to these two guys rolling them in because they're going to be important later here. Now, already, Flash is kind of looking, he's like, oh, what's this? What's this crazy gizmo? And Peter has his most, annoying, actually kind of moment. He really does, actually, that gizmo happens to be one of the scientific marvels of the age, loudmouth. It's like, oh my god, dude, we're rooting for you, but holy shit, dude, this is the most, annoying fucking, five-head, Reddit kind of, just annoying, smug online person, whatever, that he's been, and this is all before, the modern internet. Again, this is back in the 60s, so, it's hilarious to look at it. It's the most, actually nerdy moment he's had. But in any case, because of this, Flash and Peter get in a little fight, and Flash ends up knocking off Peter's glasses. Now, he does kind of mention or thinks to himself about how he doesn't really need the glasses anymore, but in any case, the two kind of, go at it a bit, and Liz is able to kind of get them to chill out, and Flash is like, we'll settle this after class. Which, by the way, anyone older that grew up in like the, I don't know, 80s plus, let me know if you ever like experience the whole "we'll settle this after class" thing, because that's something that I've seen like movies and TV shows, but I've never once seen it in real life. I saw people get into fights on like the spur of the moment in the hallways and stuff, but I've never seen like the actual, people having a dispute they want to settle after class. But I don't know, maybe it just wasn't my school. I was, maybe it wasn't my time. I was born in 97. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but yeah, I don't know. It's just never, I don't know. It's just interesting as well. So their teacher introduces a man by the name of Dr. Petty, who is with what's called the International Computing Machines Corporation. Now, I did look this up and found that this is not a real corporation. This is not like IBM or Apple or Google or anything like that. It is a fictional corporation for the sake of, Marvel. It's not even AIM. It's not like AIM with MODOK and all that either. It's completely separate from any of that. But in any case, Dr. Petty introduces this robot as basically the way he describes it is it's essentially like AI. It has these rolling wheels and these arms where it can like move quickly and you know um, kind of like grab things and stuff. But the way that he talks about it, and especially with that name, the living brain, it really does have the vibe of that it's like AI more than anything else. So, he says how basically it can find anything for you, Dr. Petty. He explains how it can find anything for you, and how the students, they just need to think of something. He tells them, I want you all to think of a question and figure it out. While he's doing this, he has Peter working on said machine, and he starts telling Peter, he's like, all right, now you're going to do X, Y, and Z, and Peter's all like, oh, don't worry, like I've read up on this stuff. Like he's I mean, like I said, this is like the most kind of insufferable Peter's been, and even that is not really like too much of a, I don't know. I just get like, he's annoying me at this point where he's like, yeah, I got it. Like, it's cool. I know what I'm doing. And then he's like, well, actually, Flan, like, oh my god, dude, like, I don't really like this issue much in general, and we'll get to it. Most of it has to do with the living brain itself, but like I said, it really is like AI. They tell the students, all right, we want you to think of something that is, an extremely difficult question that no one else would be able to think about. Now, while this is happening, of course, everybody decides Spider-Man. They want to go with, Spider-Man. What is Spider-Man's identity? More specifically, of course. Now, this is why I say it's like AI. Basically, the idea is if they can feed enough information into the machine, it can spit out an answer, and it's supposed to be able to get anything right. A lot of people are treating AI as if it can do that, and kind of using it for those means. You might notice that these days, at the time of this recording, oftentimes when you search things, a little AI answer will show up above anything else. Sometimes that can be helpful, but the problem with AI and the data it collects is it's only collecting data from it can't come up with new information. It can only regurgitate information, whereas at least with the living brain in this, it can actually regurgitate, or it can actually come up with new information, theoretically at least. But in any case, we have this whole thing where essentially everyone is, everyone's, really, kind of gassing up Spidey here. And, they have like, oh, well, he's about 5'10", which would make him about an inch tall. Well, half an inch, I guess, taller than me, whatever. Weighs about 160 pounds. In the Forest Hills area a lot, as Flash says. Of course, Liz chimes in. She's like, oh, he's the most wonderful, heroic, glamorous man in the whole world. But then we have this one guy who chimes in, and I like this note because not everyone is super loves Spider-Man. This one guy, like, he's a nut if you ask me. And I like that moment. That's kind of cool. But in any case, once all the information is fed into the machine, and Peter's of course thinking like, oh my god, my life could be over, my secret identity could be out, like this is a mess. There's a little fake out here where it shows the machine spitting out basically a receipt, with that says Peter Parker. The identity. What's the identity for Spider-Man? Peter Parker. And what we have here is we have this scene where Peter's taking the paper and getting ready to read it, and then we immediately have their teacher being like, "Well, as you know, this is written in code that you have to decipher," and so on and so forth. So it's a nice little kind of fake out to the audience, to the readers, to have this moment where it's like, all right, we're all thinking, it says, Peter on the paper, like, this is what's going to happen. How's it going to get out of this? And then we have this kind of, I don't know if it's like a Deus Ex Machina kind of thing, but it's like that whole, like, it's very convenient. It's like, well, as you know, this is a code, so it's not going to be that easy. So you'll have time tonight to translate it. And Peter does think, well, at least that'll give me time to figure this out and everything. But now, those two people I mentioned earlier who actually rolled in the living brain come important here, as they end up being these criminals who decide they're going to steal the brain and try to sell it in order to, make a ton of money. I mean, there are a ton of people, a ton of companies, etc., of course, who, of course, would pay top dollar for these kinds of things. But meanwhile, Peter and Flash get in another spat as Flash tries to, take the paper from Peter, and Peter, obviously not wanting his secret identity to be exposed, prevents Flash from doing so, and the two get into yet another physical altercation, whereas their teacher, their science teacher once again, basically tells them, all right, you know what, I've been seeing you guys fight like this all day here, all of class. If you guys are going to fight, you guys are going to fight in the ring. So you guys are going to settle this, take it to the boxing ring. So of course, with the two in the ring, Peter's main concern is that he'll really have to hold back because he could really fuck up Flash. Now, of course, everybody thinks, oh, Flash is going to wipe the floor with him. Everyone's, kind of really hyping Flash up. They're on his side and all that. But as the two begin to actually fight here, we have Peter doing, really, he's kind of doing like a Muhammad Ali kind of thing. He's floating like a butterfly and getting ready to sting like a bee. And on that note, Muhammad Ali wouldn't actually say that himself until a couple months after this issue was released. So it's interesting that kind of concept existed even before Muhammad Ali famously did that and, said that phrase. But, in any case, Peter and Flash are fighting, and he does sting like a bee. Knocks Flash out, and of course everyone's like, "Oh, you're just messing with him, Flash. Like you want him to, you want to get him off guard or something." Like, yeah, that's it. I'm just messing around. I'm all right. Now I'm serious, kind of thing, right? Meanwhile, the criminals are in the process of stealing the living brain, but as they're doing so, the guy from before, Mr. Petty, who actually brought the machine in, catches the two in the act and tries to stop them. But in the altercation that occurs, they end up hitting a button that somehow causes the living brain to go haywire, and it starts, flinging its arms around and everything, and charging, and getting ready to destroy everything in its path as the two criminals now get away and escape the situation. Meanwhile, Peter and Flash are in the middle of having their fight, and a staff member makes their way into the gym, letting everyone know, this robot's on rampage, we got to get somebody to help, causing Flash to look away for a split second, and as he does, Peter's in the middle of throwing a punch that he can't stop in time, and knocks Flash out cold. Now, this, of course, causes the crowd to be extremely upset, thinking, oh, that was a dirty trick, that was the only way you could have won, all these different things, right? And I think that this entire moment here, this entire fight, was the inspiration for, like, the fight in the Sam Raimi movie, the first one, where Peter, where they're fighting, and he's like, I don't want to fight you, Flash. Wouldn't want to fight me neither. That whole thing, right? Um, I think that this is where that whole concept of Peter and Flash actually fighting comes from, because as we'll get to it way later in the Ultimate Comics, they play basketball, which is similar to what Peter does in the Amazing Spider-Man, the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, the Mark Webb movie with Andrew Garfield. If I'm remembering all this correctly, I might be getting my wires crossed a bit, but yeah, it's interesting. I think this is where all of that comes from, and I think that that's really, well, interesting, like I just said. Well, the robot is, of course, on a rampage, so Spidey suits up and gets ready to take it out as he, of course, gets in the middle of and saves a bunch of the school kids, getting everybody to, get out of the building and everything as he takes, takes on the machine. Now, this machine, though, of course, is strong, fast, and intelligent. Spidey learns very quickly that it's able to predict his moves before he even makes them, because it's learning while it's fighting him. So similar to the fight with Sandman in issue 4, the two Spidey, as he's fighting the living brain, they're fighting throughout the school and everything, and he finds some stragglers behind as he, gets basically sidetracked and distracted from his fight with the robot. And there's this really impressive moment where they tell him, "Oh, we can't get out because the exit door is jammed," and he breaks through it, which they even remark he breaks through it like it's nothing, like it's paper. And I really like this moment because it's just a very small, it's literally just one panel, but it's a really small kind of moment of just showing his strength. We're kind of getting a lot of that, actually, between him having to pull his punches with Flash and still knocking him out, and this whole situation of breaking this. A lot of times Spidey's strength is kind of underestimated, I would say, because he's not normally drawn and animated to look really that stereotypically strong and bulky and stuff like that. But Spider-Man is an extremely strong character, and he is constantly holding back when he fights anybody. And again, we see he knocked out Flash while he was holding back. He can do these incredible things. So I think it's just an important kind of, it's cool. It's just a nice little subtle, I would say, showing of his strength. But, as he's trying to find the living brain once again, a door knocks him down. And I love this because it's such a comical moment where a door knocks him down, and as Spidey's about to get back up, we have the criminals that were trying to get away with the brain and everything, right? We have them stepping on him, so it's that kind of moment, right, where he's just about to get up and then he's stepped on again immediately. It's a nice little moment of comedy, and it also, of course, has them really explaining everything out to Spidey, where they're like, oh, now that the brain's gone, let's get out of here before anyone realizes we did this. And Spidey kind of puts it together. He's like, oh, so it's these guys' fault that the brain's on a rampage. So Spidey and the brain continue to do battle all across the school when the living brain, not the brain, the living brain, when it's on its way to take down yet two more straggling students, as Spidey's able to jump on it and deactivate its control panel, causing it to finally stop its, well, not really killing spree, because it's not intentionally killing, but its destruction spree, causing it to, finally stop and not be going haywire anymore. But we have one last action set piece as it's making its way towards the stairs, and Spidey, does this quick little thing where he kind of, webs a staircase, swings out a window, back in through. This is kind of like the whole thing with Electro and facing off against the cops and everything after Electro's been caught, where it's kind of just these extra few panels and pages that just didn't really need to exist. Like, we get it, he did the thing, he saved the day, but in any case, with it finally deactivated and all, the criminals are just about to get away when we have this moment as Flash is finally coming to and gets up, the criminals trip over him and knock themselves out. They're then able to be arrested by the police, and everybody's like, "Oh wow, Flash! How did you do it? How did you take him down?" And he's like, "Well, you know me. I just let him have it with how strong I am and everything." Peter's like, he decides to turn this around on him, and I actually really like this moment and this bit of character from him here, where he's like, come to think of it, you were nowhere to be seen when Spidey was fighting the living brain, and you're a fairly strong dude. You just took these guys out, no problem. How do we know you're not Spider-Man? And he really turns around on him. It's like, what? No, I couldn't be Spider-Man. All this kind of thing. And then we end with this really nice panel where Peter's essentially monologuing to himself, and let's be real, of course, telling the audience about how he's, everyone's gonna forget about him possibly being Spider-Man. He's gonna find an excuse to get rid of the paper, and all's well that ends well. And I really like this shot. I really like these. I've talked about this before, but I really like these illustrations by Steve Ditko where you have like half Peter and half Spider-Man. I've talked about this before. Spectacular Spider-Man alluded to this kind of thing a lot. I don't think I've ever seen them do this in live action unless it happened in the MCU and I just don't remember it. But I love these moments where you see like a half Peter, half Spider-Man face or something like that. It's such a cool thing and such a way to clue the audience in and like, yes, this is something that affects Peter and Spider-Man in some way. So, I think that kind of thing's really cool and all. But that's the end of the first episode, The Terror of the Living Brain. But it is not the end of the issue or this video, because we do have yet another story featuring the Human Torch as the cover of this issue explains. We continue with Spider-Man Tackles the Torch, written by Stan Lee and illustrated this time by Jack Kirby, of course, who does the Fantastic Four issue. So makes perfect sense for him to do this story. Now, this is we're gonna get into it here as we really get into Spidey's character, but he's basically just crashing a party that Human Torch is having. He's having this whole event, and he has this extremely petty thing where he basically talks about how the Human Torch has this girlfriend. He knows his girlfriend lives in the neighborhood, and he's gonna show her how much of a better man he is, how much she's missing out by not dating Spider-Man. It's like, why do you know or care who his girlfriend is? Like, this is a very, again, it's one of those things where I believe it's a very contrived way of doing this whole thing. But, we got to have comic characters meet each other, and that means they have to fight, and you know how it goes. So, yeah. But in any case, we have this whole event where Torch, like I said, he's having this party, and Spidey decides, for no reason, to just crash the party. I mean, I mentioned the reason about, but other than that, I mean, he's got, like, no real issue here. Now, you guys know how I feel about using his webs to make things that aren't just, like, a web line or web bullets or something. This takes the cake. My man makes a bat out of webs. Now, this whole panel brings up two things that I have issues with. First of all, you guys know at this point how I feel about him using his webs to make things like a bat, not even a baseball bat like he had it when he first fought the Fantastic Four in the Fantastic Four Annual Issue #1, but a bat with wings, like an animal bat, just flying through the sky. So that's the first issue I have. The second issue that I have is this background is blue, but I think it's supposed to be nighttime. The reason I say that is because I'll be sure to point this out when it becomes relevant for other things as well, but there are a lot of times in early comics here, and I'm not quite sure when it got better, but there are a lot of times where it'll be night, but it's it looks like the daytime. You know, like this. Like it's insane. Now, before Spidey showed up, Torch had been having a blast, showing off his new car, showing off his powers, all these different things. He's a show off. He was the life of a party. He was having a good time. So he understandably gets pissed at Spidey and tells him basically, "All right, if you're not going to leave peacefully, I'll toss you out on your pointy ear." And Spider-Man says, "He's like, who writes your dialogue? Frank Merriwell," which is a reference to a comic character that basically went on throughout the 20s and 30s, the 1920s and 30s. God, I have to specify the 1920s and 30s here in the year of 2024. Jesus. Anyway, the 1920s and 30s, and although it was revitalized in 1965 for a short time, and I have to wonder if Spider-Man's reference to it had anything to do with that. It was revitalized in 1965 for a short time, and I wonder if this little reference brought it kind of back into the mainstream, and publishers were like, "Hey, wait, this might actually be relevant again." So, I don't know. That's just complete speculation, but shot in the dark. Looked it up, was curious, given my 2 cents there. In any case, the two of them begin fighting, and this between the last issue and this is the like pettiest Spider-Man's been in a that we've seen. As far as I'm concerned. But they make their way to a beach throughout all their fighting. And I don't have as much of an issue with this. I still kind of do, but not as much. Spidey, well, first he has a moment where he does the parachute thing again with his webs, or rather, almost web umbrellas. But then he turns his webs into these nets, and he gathers up sand and is able to basically, kind of throw sand on Human Torch, cooling him down, cooling him off, so he can't flame on anymore. The two of them, of course, fight for a while, and you know how this kind of thing goes. But eventually, Spidey runs into the rest of the Fantastic Four, and they're really on his side here, where they're like, "Hey, let's give you a hand." And the Thing even remarks how, oh, the Torch is tougher than you thought, right? He's not as easy as you thought, right? And yet Spidey takes the whole thing as an insult, and he's like, "Oh, I'm not going to let you guys laugh at me," and everything. And the two of them are just once again, Spidey gets into another fight with all of the Fantastic Four, and this time I would say they pretty much beat him. I wouldn't really say, yeah, this is definitely a moment where they all beat him. Now, we do have a moment where Spidey makes a web cape thing for himself, a web glider, if you will. And interestingly, he's not using his already web wings that he has. He makes his own webbing for this, and it's an interesting concept, right? Using the webs like this, but to have it done in this way, where it's like, dude, you already have the web wings, just use those. But I don't know. It is what it is. In any case, like I said, the Fantastic Four, really hand it to Spidey. And I don't know if this is because this is a story by Jack Kirby or what the deal is, but in any case, they do hand it to him. And Sue kind of, feels sorry for him. She's like, I'll bet I'll bet you're as handsome. I'll bet you're handsome under that mask. I'll bet you're, you're too smart for this. You're too clever. All these different things, right? She's really kind of gassing him up, and Spidey kind of comes to the realization. He's like, all right, Sue is the only one of you out of any of you that I actually care about at this point. None of you else, no one else on your team is actually really giving a damn about me. And because Sue tries to get Spidey and Torch to make up. She's like, all right, why don't you two bury the hatchet, shake hands like gentlemen, make up. And there's a moment here where actually Torch even says, he's like, oh yeah, I'd love to bury the hatchet, and I'll let you guess where. Now, I don't know if that's a crass comment where he means up his ass, or if he means a hatchet in his head. But either way, it's kind of a bit of a either crass or kind of dark joke for something that had to abide by something like the comics code of authority. So I like that they were able to get that in. But in any case, Spidey just kind of gets pissy again, all petty, and he's like, "All right, none of you even matter except for Sue." He's like, "She's the only one worth anything as far as I'm concerned." As he runs off and has like another little kind of tantrum, but he does leave behind. And again, I don't really like the whole making things out of his webs kind of thing. You guys know this, but it's kind of cute because he leaves behind a web heart for Sue, Invisible Girl or Invisible Woman, and yeah, it's I don't know. It's fine. It is what it is. But in any case, that is the end of this issue, and that is the end of the Amazing Spider-Man issue number 8. This issue overall, I read these before I am going to go over them. I read these like pretty far in advance, and before I even knew that I was going to start doing this kind of thing. When I first read this issue, and when I knew that I was going to do this kind of review for it, I was kind of dreading it. I kind of knew that I wasn't going to like coming back to it because I didn't really like reading it the first time. Like I've said before, I don't really like robots in the first place. Um, and this, the living brain was kind of a non-issue for a lot of it. I think there were more stakes in his fight with Flash and his secret identity potentially getting out. Those were the real stakes. But everything just so conveniently wrapped up where he's like, "Oh, I'll just say I lost the paper and that'll be the end of that." Like, all these different things. Peter's pettiness is just absolutely insane here. Like, this is the hero that we're meant to be rooting for. And this is a good example where he was not always this goody two shoes guy that we've seen him to be, thanks to things like the Sam Raimi interpretation of him with Tobey Maguire. How he played Spider-Man. That was not Spider-Man. Like, a lot of people know Spider-Man and Peter Parker to be this like goody two shoes kind of guy. That's not who he is. That's not who he was, especially in the early comics. And his pettiness is just on full display, from the actually, Flash, in the beginning, all the way to him wanting to, I don't know, try to be Mr. Steal Your Girl to the Torch and take, I think her name was Doris, and be like, I'll show her what she's missing. It's like, dude, like, what the fuck? Also, aren't you into Betty Brant? Aren't you trying to like have something going with her? Like, it's just, and of course that whole their whole battle and everything was so contrived. I think this is the most contrived issue, I would say, of all the things. Now, I do think the fight with Flash and Peter in the gym there, while I think adaptations have done it better, like the Raimi adaptation, I think this is where that idea comes from, of them fighting. And I like the idea of them fighting and having this whole thing in general. I'm open to the idea of the living brain being an interesting villain. I know it does come back later, but for now, at least, it was lame. I don't know. It was kind of a lame issue, in my opinion. And again, the whole second story where he's crashing Torch's party, the bat made out of webs, the fighting, like everything, I just it wasn't my cup of tea. But it is what it. They're not all going to be hits. They're not all going to be winners. I can easily see why we don't have the living brain as a main villain in adaptations and stuff, because it's kind of lame. I don't know. This is so far my least favorite issue of everything we've reviewed thus far, everything we've talked about. But obviously it'll get better from here. This certainly isn't the worst it gets, and that we have far to go from here. So it's not like this is the end or anything, obviously. But Yeah, I just really didn't care for this issue overall. But, hey, these are just my thoughts. Let me know what yours are in the comments down below. Subscribe to ring the bell to stay up to date. Leave a like if you like. And if not, I hope you find something to do like. Later, guys. Peace and love.